Excuse me, are you the help? The CEO's wife eyed me from head to toe as if I were something unpleasant stuck to her expensive heel. Servers should use the side entrance. Nearby, three executives hid their laughter behind champagne glasses, while my 14-year-old daughter Zoe, who I'd brought so she could see what a real professional event looked like, stared with widening eyes. None of them knew, not even the CEO himself fully understood, that I was the founding partner who owned 62% of the company and personally chose him for his job. Ashford Technologies' annual gala at the Ritz-Carlton was a tradition I'd started 12 years ago, back when the company was nothing more than an idea scribbled on napkins in my cramped studio apartment. Now it had grown into a $340 million company with offices in 6 countries. 700 employees depended on us for their livelihoods, and the wife of the man I entrusted to run it had mistaken me for hired staff. I wore a simple black dress, elegant but modest, because I'd never liked showing off. My hair was pulled back, and the only jewelry I had on was a pair of my mother's pearl earrings. I probably looked like someone who worked for a living, which I did. "I'm not with catering," I replied evenly. The woman, Diane Ashworth, wife of CEO Gregory Ashworth, raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Then who are you?" "This is an executive event, invitation only." "I'm aware," I said. "I designed the invitation list." A flicker of confusion crossed her face. Before she could speak again, Gregory appeared beside her, champagne in hand, laughing from whatever conversation he'd just abandoned. "Diane, darling, I see you've met—" He stopped. All color drained from his face. "Ms. Monroe, I didn't realize you were attending this year." "I almost didn't," I answered. "But I wanted to show my daughter what our annual celebration looks like." I gestured toward Zoe, who stood slightly behind me, cheeks flushed with indignation. Gregory's eyes bounced from me to his wife. Diane's expression shifted from superiority to uncertainty. "Your daughter?" she repeated. "I'm sorry, I don't believe we've met. I'm Diane Ashworth." "I know who you are," I said. A heavy silence settled over the group. The executives who'd been snickering were now staring intently into their drinks. "I was just explaining to your wife that I don't work for the catering company," I continued. "Though I can understand the mix-up. Simple black dress, no diamonds. I must look wildly out of place among all this." I gestured lightly at the glittering crowd. "Success." Gregory laughed too quickly. "Ms. Monroe has a unique sense of humor. She's actually leaving," I cut in. "Zoe has school tomorrow, and I think we've seen enough." I placed a protective arm around my daughter and headed toward the exit. Behind us, I heard Gregory whisper sharply, "Do you have any idea who that was?" I didn't hear Diane's answer. I didn't need to. The next morning, I was in my home office by 6 a.m. The room was plain, a repurposed spare bedroom with a second-hand desk and a view of my modest backyard. Nothing about it hinted at the wealth it had produced. I'd started Ashford Technologies in 2012 with $50,000 saved from 10 years working as a software engineer. The name wasn't even mine. I'd pulled it from a random generator because I wanted the company to earn its reputation, not borrow mine. For the first 3 years, I was everything: CEO, CFO, lead developer, customer support, even janitor. Once we needed to grow, I brought in investors. I kept a majority stake, but stepped back from daily management. I was brilliant at building systems, not managing people, and I've always known my limits. 5 years ago, I hired Gregory Ashworth as CEO. He had every polished qualification I lacked: an MBA from Wharton, the slick confidence, the ability to charm investors and impress clients. On paper, he was perfect. In practice, a troubling pattern emerged. The culture was changing. Complaints about toxic behavior were rising. Women were leaving at twice the rate of men, and Gregory seemed more invested in flashy appearances than meaningful leadership. I'd been planning to address it for months, but last night sped everything up. At 7 a.m., I emailed him and the entire executive team. Subject line: Emergency Board Meeting, 10 a.m., full attendance required. Topic: Company Culture and Leadership Evaluation. E. Monroe, Founding Partner. The phone rang within minutes. Eleanor, about last night. Ms. Monroe, Diane didn't know who you were. It was an honest mistake. Was it? I asked. She looked at me and immediately assumed I didn't belong. That tells me something about the culture we've allowed. She's not an employee, he argued. She's my wife. Her opinions aren't the company's problem. Her opinions reflect what she hears at home, what she believes is acceptable, what she thinks represents us. I paused. We'll talk at 10. I hung up before he could answer. Zoe joined me in the kitchen while I made coffee. Are you okay, Mom? I'm fine, sweetheart. That lady was really mean. She looked at us like we were garbage. Some people judge others by appearances instead of character. It says more about them than it does about us. But you own the company. You could have told her. I could have, but I wanted to see how she treated someone she thought was beneath her. That's how you learn who people really are. Did she fail? Zoe asked. Spectacularly. She grinned. Are you going to fire her husband? That depends on the conversation we have today. The board meeting took place in the executive conference room at our downtown headquarters. The mahogany table seated 20, though only 8 chairs were filled. Myself, Gregory, the 5 board members, and Sandra Wells, our head of HR. Gregory sat at the head of the table, a position he'd claimed years ago without ever being given permission. I took the seat directly opposite him. Thank you all for coming on short notice, I began. We need to discuss the company's direction, especially our workplace culture. Is this about last night? Gregory cut in. Because I've already spoken with Diane. She feels terrible about the misunderstanding. This is about much more than last night. Sandra, will you share the retention data? Sandra opened her laptop with the calm focus of someone who had been waiting for this exact moment. Over the past 3 years, female employee turnover has risen by 47%. Exit interviews cite a hostile environment, limited advancement, and dismissive leadership as the main reasons. Those are subjective complaints, Gregory argued. People leave for all kinds of reasons. 63% of departing female employees specifically referenced interactions with senior leadership as influencing their decision, Sandra replied. Gregory's jaw tightened. This feels like a witch hunt. It feels like data, I responded. Sandra, continue. In the past 18 months, we've received 14 formal complaints regarding inappropriate comments. 3 mention executives by name. None resulted in meaningful action. We followed procedure, Gregory insisted. Every complaint was reviewed, and every complaint was dismissed as a misunderstanding or personality conflict. I opened the folder in front of me. I've reviewed the investigation files. The pattern is unmistakable. The other board members shifted uncomfortably. They were used to collecting fees and approving quarterly reports. Real accountability was inconvenient. I've spent 12 years building this company, I said. I stayed out of the spotlight because I believed operational expertise mattered more than my presence. But I've realized that absence has consequences. When leadership faces no repercussions for dismissive behavior, that behavior becomes the norm. What exactly are you proposing? Asked Harold, the longest-serving board member. A full culture audit conducted by an external firm, mandatory training for all executives on inclusive leadership, and a restructuring of our complaint process to ensure independent investigation. That could take months, Gregory protested, and cost a fortune. We made $47 million in profit last year. We can afford to invest in our people. This is overreach, Eleanor. You're a silent partner. Governance falls to the board. I'm the CEO. I'm the majority owner. I founded this company, and I've been silent long enough. The room fell still. There's something else, I continued. Last night, your wife looked at me, the person who built everything you benefit from, and assumed I was the help. And when I told her I wasn't, she demanded to know who I was. She couldn't imagine that someone who looks like me could belong at an executive event. That's not fair. Diane reflects what she's been taught to accept. She's watched you belittle women's contributions for years. She's heard you joke about diversity hires and political correctness. She has absorbed the message that some people belong here and others don't. Gregory's cheeks flushed. You're basing company policy on one comment from my wife at a party? I'm basing company policy on 3 years of data, 14 formal complaints, a 47% increase in female turnover, and the look on my 14-year-old daughter's face as she watched your wife humiliate me. That struck a nerve. Several board members exchanged uneasy looks. Zoe asked me this morning if I was going to fire you, I said. I told her it depends on this conversation. So I'll ask you directly, Gregory. Are you willing to participate in meaningful culture change? To be held accountable for the environment you've created? To acknowledge that your leadership has caused harm? He sat in silence, thinking. And if I say no? Then we begin discussing your severance package. The room held its breath. Finally, Gregory leaned back in his chair. What would this accountability look like? We spent the next 3 hours discussing it. By the end, we had a framework: external audit, executive coaching, revised complaint procedures, quarterly culture reports delivered directly to the board. Gregory would remain CEO on a probationary basis, with measurable expectations he would be required to meet. He didn't like it, but he disliked the alternative more. As the meeting wrapped up and people drifted toward the door, Sandra gently touched my arm. Thank you, she said softly. I've been documenting these problems for 2 years. No one would listen. I should have listened sooner. You're listening now, she replied. That matters. That evening, I took Zoe out for pizza, her pick after a long, emotional week. Did you fire him? She asked as she folded her slice in half. Not yet. He's going to try to improve. Do you think he actually will? I think people can change when there are consequences for refusing to change. We'll find out. That lady called you the help, Zoe said. Like serving food is something to be ashamed of. There's nothing wrong with honest work, I told her. Your grandmother was a housekeeper for 30 years. She raised me alone, sent me to college, and taught me what integrity looks like. So why did it still hurt? Zoe asked. I thought about it before answering. Because she wasn't insulting the job. She was deciding I was worth less than she was based on how I looked. That kind of judgment, that's what hurts. Zoe frowned. You're worth more than all of them put together. Maybe not, I said, but I've worked hard to build something that matters. And I won't let anyone make me feel small because of it. Even people in fancy dresses with mean faces? She teased. I laughed. Especially them. 6 months later, the culture audit was complete. The numbers were improving. Gregory was reluctantly putting new systems into place, and according to reliable whispers, Diane had become noticeably more cautious about how she spoke to strangers during company events. At the next annual gala, I wore the same simple black dress. This time, Zoe wore a matching one. It was her idea. When Diane Ashworth spotted us from across the room, she paused, then walked over. Ms. Monroe, I owe you an apology. You do? I'm sorry for how I spoke to you last year. It was unacceptable. It was, I agreed. I accept your apology. She exhaled with relief, unsure what to say next. I helped her out. This is my daughter, Zoe. She's the reason I've pushed so hard for culture change. I want her to grow up in a world where women aren't dismissed based on their appearance. Diane looked at Zoe with something close to genuine warmth. That's a worthy goal. We think so, I said. She nodded and excused herself. Zoe watched her walk away. That was awkward. Growth usually is, I replied. Do you think she means it? I think she means it today, I said. Whether it lasts depends on whether she keeps doing the work. Like her husband. Like everyone, I said. Including me. Zoe squeezed my hand. You're doing great, Mom. I looked around at the Gala, the company I'd built, the people working to make it better, the future we were shaping together. We both are, sweetheart, I said. We both are the help. That's what she'd called me before. But help is what we give each other. Help is what builds companies, changes culture, and shapes people into something stronger. I'd spent 12 years helping build something meaningful, and I wasn't finished. Not by a long shot.